Hi, I'm Catherine.
And I'm Matthew.
We're here to taste and talk through a selection of our Generation and Anniversary Series wines, which are currently available also in sample packs.
We're going to start with a few wines from our Generation series. This is a range of wines that we started curating back in 2020. We wanted to put together a range of wines that would appeal to the broadest possible range of Wine Society members that we could use and release throughout the 150th year so that we could celebrate throughout the year. We had the idea of celebrating each 50-year period of the Wine Society's history. So we released the first quarter of wines back in January, and these celebrated the first 50 years of the Wine Society from 1874 to 1924. Then in March, we released the second 50-year period, celebrating 1924 to 1974. And then we are just about to release the third quarter, which celebrates the wines up until present day. But what's really exciting is that later this year, we'll be launching a range of wines which we think are going to typify the Wine Society's wine range for the next 50 years. So as buyers, we're putting our money where our mouth is slightly and predicting what we think are going to be the big trends in wine over the next 50 years, which is really exciting. But firstly, we've got our Muscadet from the Generation series. This was part of our second release, celebrating 1924 to 1974. We wanted to showcase Muscadet because it's been an integral part of our lists for over 100 years now. And also what was really exciting is that it was in this period that the Muscadet Sèvres-Etmans-sur-Lie appellation was officially certified. And so we wanted to do a wine which reflected this style. It comes from a Wine Society favourite, the Charot family of Charot-Carré, and I think they've put together an absolutely fantastic wine for us. It's from the quite ripe 2022 vintage. It's also been raised in old oak barrels, and so it does have a little bit more breadth, a little bit more texture, a little bit more savouriness to it as well. But why don't we have a smell, have a taste, and I'll let you be the judge.
Absolutely.
So it's quite golden in colour. And lots of flavours and aromas of quince and some baked apple there, some cinnamon, a little bit of nutmeg. That's probably from the old oak barrels.
I think what's really nice as well is you're getting a lot of that texture. So in terms of the appellation, the Man-sur-Lie, it means it's had some lees stirring, the lees being the dead yeast cells. So it gives that lovely mouthfeel and texture to the wine.
Absolutely, you do get some of that bready character, but for me the really defining thing of this style is that fantastic acidity. I mentioned it's a slightly riper vintage, so you do get that breadth of fruit, but really importantly there's this core of acidity running through the wine, keeping it super fresh. And I do think this is delicious now. You could have it with some seafood, some shellfish, some salads, anything vegetarian really, but I do think it's going to develop over the next year or so, and it's a really good, fun, exciting wine from a producer that we really love. So
absolutely, and we do have a video now from Louise of Charot-Carré, who will tell you a little bit more about the wine.
Hi everyone, my name is Louise Chéreau. I am the third generation of the Charot-Carré family to work at the estate in Muscadet. We've been very lucky now to have strong relationship with the Wine Society for over 35 years, and it's a pleasure for us to participate in this 150th anniversary. When we have started with Joe to talk about having a Muscadet that could be the same as what used to be in the 70s when the Wine Society started to import Muscadet in the UK. It was a very a good challenge for us to try to reply to this question. The fact is that at that time in Muscadet, most of the wine was stored in a barrel. So we ended up in finding that we could have a Muscadet with a blend of some un-oak Muscadet and some that was aged in oak. And the result today is to have something a little bit round, quite strong in mouth as well, but very, very refreshing still, because we still have this liveliness of the Muscadet. I hope that you will enjoy this wine as much as we enjoyed making it.
So next up in our Generation series, we have our French rosé. Now, this is celebrating the third quarter, so this is 1974 to 2024, and the range wouldn't be complete without a French rosé. It has been one of the most consistently popular and also an area that's in real growth over the last 10 years, almost more than any other style of wine. So we had to include one. This comes from the Perrin family, probably most famous for producers of Miraval, which is one of the most famous rosés in the world. So it's a real treat to be able to do a wine exclusively for the Wine Society from them. And what also makes this wine really quite special and quite fascinating for me anyway, as a bit of a wine geek, is that it comes from the Sable de Camargue. Now, this is an area that's only just been given its AOC, its appellation, and it's from 2023, which is the vintage of this wine. So this is basically the first vintage allowing to use that name on the label as an appellation, which is really quite exciting. As you can see, it's perfectly pale in colour. It's got a little bit of almost kind of onion skin to it. It's the classic pale Provençal style rosé in colour. So let's have a smell, let's have a taste and see if we agree. It's lovely kind of fresh cherries on the nose, a little bit of strawberry and a crushed strawberry and some nice herby flavours as well.
And it's a blend, Matthew, is it? It's got some Grenache in there? Is
Yes.
there some Sanso?
Yeah, predominantly Grenache with a little bit of Sanso and a little bit of Syrah as well. And I don't know about you, but I'm getting loads of rosemary and thyme on the palate.
There's lovely woody herbs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think often rosés can be quite one-dimensional. They can have lots of lovely, fresh, crunchy red fruits, but often don't offer that much more, whereas I do think this has fantastic herbal complexity. It's got fantastic length. It's really refreshing on the palate, and I can picture myself sitting in the sun with quite a large glass of that, enjoying it. Next up in the lineup is our Generation Series Rioja. Now, this was part of the first release of the Generation Series, celebrating 1874 to 1924. And really the hope was that we could reenact the styles of wine that Wine Society members would have been drinking during that period. And so our buyer for Spain, Pierre, spent a lot of time researching the style and came across a producer that we've been working with for nearly 20 years now, Hacienda López de Haro, and really appealed to them and said, come on guys, how was Rioja made 150 years ago? And they went away, they did a bit of research, and they came back to say, well, really the predominant thing is that rather than Tempranillo, which is now the most planted grape variety in Rioja, it would have predominantly been Grenache. And so we have a dominated Grenache red wine here. And also this would have predated a lot of the current aging terms for Rioja, such as Crianza or Reserva. And so instead it's named Terca Año, so that's third year. And so this wine has spent 3 years maturing, of which about 10 months were in wood and the rest is in bottle. And so we're getting some nice development there. And also hopefully you can see from the label, the intention for this range was to document the Society's history on the label as well. So we've got key members of the Wine Society's history, but also key moments from around the world during this period. And there's an amazing timeline on the website where you can go and look through the whole history of the Wine Society with lots of really interesting, some quite funny little tidbits from the Wine Society's 150 years. So let's have a smell, let's have a taste and see what we think.
I think what's quite interesting about this one, Matthew, is that it's very fruit forward, it's very full and ripe, which, considering it's from a time period that is so far back, it may be more in the style of what members would expect from a modern style Rioja nowadays. whereas actually that's the style that they were drinking back when we started.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a big argument at the moment, well, I wouldn't say argument, discussion maybe, about traditional versus modern Rioja. Traditional, super savoury, long oak maturation, quite oxidative in its style, and then modern Rioja, which is this big, full, quite tannic, very fruit-forward style. And you're absolutely right, this has got so much fruit to it, that lovely, ripe, plummy, strawberry Grenache, but then there's some savouriness coming forward as well. What sort of thing would you be eating?
Or definitely some grilled meats, something with some real charred quality to it. So if you're looking for vegetables, some like aubergines, peppers, things like that. Looking for food that will carry the weight of the wine, because it does have that lovely mouthfeel to it. Some cheeses as well would be really good.
Yeah, and personally, I wouldn't be afraid to serve this wine lightly chilled. I'd be thinking also maybe some oily fish, some sardines maybe could work really nicely, because there is a lovely fresh acidity to the wine as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it will mature, but really I think this wine's so gorgeous now that I'd be drinking it within the next year.
Absolutely. And here we have Raoul and Pierre talking about and tasting the wine.
Now the red, this is the Rioja Tinto that we'll be releasing in very early in our 150th year in 2024. And I remember when I came here, I think it was around 2020, and we talked about what was happening in Rioja in the first 50 years of the Wine Society's history, so 1874 to 1924. And I left this challenge with you, and after a few months you came back with a proposal. Now tell us, and so we can tell members, what the concept is behind the red wine.
But the concept is again something more known in the past of Rioja, that was to speak about the year in which the wine is released. But in this one, it's a third year. So we didn't speak at that moment. I'm speaking a lot of decades ago, and we didn't speak of crianza or reserva or gran reserva. We were speaking about the third year, 5 year, and this one is that idea, or the third year of a red, with an aging in barrel, again working with the traditional grapes, with the Tempranillo, principal one, but with Garnacha and a little of Graciano. It's a wine that expresses that style of Rioja, really very nice, rounded, classic Rioja, easy to drink, but with a good fruity style at the same time. This balance between the aging, the classic aging of Rioja with 225 liters barrels, long aging, but at the same time can keep very fruity style, very nice, very easy to drink, soft tannins, that style that we say Rioja de trago largo, that you can drink very easy, and for that reason we say trago largo, that you drink long because it's you drink very easy.
Easy to drink, Moorish, easy to drink.
Yeah.
And this is great because, again, this has just been bottled.
Yes.
Of course, we're filming this before our anniversary, and the labels are being prepared. And we have labelled it, as you said, with no mention of Crianza Reserva, because in the period of the first 50 years of the Wine Society, these terms didn't exist. We just put third year, which means it's aged for 3 years, and it's very fruity and really, really appealing to drink. So, salud, thank you very much.
Salud.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And the final wine from the Generation Series in this tasting is the Generation Series Ventoux. This is produced for us by the Jaume family, who we've been working with for decades now, and we knew we wanted to include them in this special Generation Series of wines because they have been an integral part to the Wine Society for over 50 years now. And as a style, Côte de Rhône has been a massive part of Wine Society sales over the last 70, 100 years, and so we wanted to include something from the Southern Rhône that really typifies that big, rich, really generous style that you often get there. And Marcel, our buyer, decided to go for a Ventoux, which is probably a lesser known area of the Southern Rhone, but it's really quite special because it's in an area which has a natural valley going east, which basically connects the area to the Alps. And so there's this constant flow of really cool air heading into what is a pretty warm growing region. And so you end up with this wonderful freshness, this lovely spice, and this real lift to the fruit as well. And we're certain that fruit from Ventoux would have been an essential part of Côte d'Aron over the last 80, 90 years. Should we try the wine?
Absolutely. God, it's got that really lovely ripe cherries and berries on the nose, isn't it? Should we have a taste?
Absolutely. I think you really get that freshness of that cool air, because often you can have these quite almost raisiny fruit characters with some Southern Rhone styles, but this has got wonderful lift. As you mentioned, nice cherry notes, there's some plum, there's some strawberry, and again there's this fantastic herbal character there. You're getting a bit of thyme, you're getting a bit of rosemary, the tannins are lovely and sweet, and again you've got that fantastic fresh acidity going through the core of the wine. So
yeah, I agree, it really freshens up the richness to it, so it's very moreish, and you want to go back for more, but it's not too heavy on your palate at all.
And in terms of what you'd eat with this wine?
Oh, I think you'd go for your very sort of traditional summer stews, maybe even some autumn winter stews, lighter, heavier food. It really can stand up to anything with a lot of flavour and a lot of weight to it. It's really a really tasty wine.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
Here's Marcel and Richard chatting about the wine.
Bon, ça c'est l'assemblage de la cuve anniversaire, Grenache Syrah 2021, qu'est-ce que tu en penses?
Moi je pense que c'est bien parce que c'est bien de la fraîcheur, du fruit, c'est facile, ça donnera beaucoup de plaisir aux gens. Moi je suis absolument ravi. Richard?
Santé.
We've now got two wines from our anniversary range. Matthew, could you tell us a little bit more about the range?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a range that we started putting together 10 years ago, believe it or not, when our colleague Sarah Knowles, MW, first joined the business. It was pretty much her first project, really, was to put together a range of wines to help celebrate our 150th anniversary in 2024. And one of the massive benefits of the Wine Society is that we have the ability to buy fine wine and mature it at the Wine Society and release it when it's ready to drink. And this is something that we really wanted to showcase in 2024 by curating a range of wines from some of the world's top producers and some of the most sought after styles and most popular styles, of course, for Wine Society members, aging them in the Wine Society cellars. So there was a minimum requirement of 5 years maturation for reds and 3 years for whites. And we released these earlier this year, and I think the whole range is absolutely incredible. And today we've got the Amarone, which is a fascinating style of wine. It's from the northeast of Italy. It's a blend of 40% Corvina, 40% Corvignone, 17% Rondinella, and 3% of a grape which I've genuinely never heard of before, called Ossoletta. And it's made in the traditional Amarone style, and so quite late harvested grapes, so they're big and rich and full of sugar. Then they're left to dry in the sun for about 4 months to shrivel up, where the grapes will lose about 40% of their mass, and that concentrates not just the flavour, but also the sugar and the acidity. So what you're left with after fermentation, which is done in stainless steel, before 18 months in brand new barriques, is you get this really intense, concentrated, really brightly fruited, slightly sweet. There's a few grams per litre of sugar in there as well, but it's this big, rich, bold, fruity style. So why don't we have a taste and see if you agree? I should say this is produced for us by the Allegrini family, who are one of the top producers of Amarone.
That's a really delicious wine. There's so much richness and flavour to it. It's powerful without being overbearing and heavy. It's got real elegance to it as well. It's really tasty.
Yeah, absolutely. For for people who like full-bodied styles of red wine, this is definitely up there. And you're getting some of that dried fruit character on the palate with the tannins as well. There's a slightly almost raisiny tannin profile, which is really Moorish, but it's really the key of that wonderful acid, that fantastic smoky, cedary, nutmeggy note that you get from the oak, that little bit of residual sugar just filling out the mid palate. What I'd eat with it, I'll leave that up to you. What do you think?
Oh, you've put me on the spot with this one. Again, I think foods that have a real richness and perhaps are quite protein heavy to really pair along nicely with the tannins in there. Maybe some really nice grilled meats, some nice lentil sort of stews, anything that has that nice smoky flavour throughout. Anything with some bacon or lardons in there would be really, really delicious.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm picturing a big hearty ragu to have with this, and again, I wouldn't be too afraid about serving this lightly chilled. I think the fruit will really aid it, and again, I think it will get better. But it's so approachable now. You know, it's got a number of years under its belt already, and so the tannins are wonderfully integrated, as is the acidity, and it's a really generous, just really velvety style of wine. So.
Absolutely. And with that generosity, would you suggest this would be a wine perhaps to decant? Would it benefit from decanting?
Yeah, I think you could decant it. I don't think there's any necessary need to do it because of any deposits in the bottle. I think one of the real charms of this wine is the aroma, and so I worry that you might lose some of that if you were to decant, but if you find the acidity a little bit too overbearing, then some time in a decanter will soften it out, no problem. But I think it's a fantastic wine, so I hope you enjoy. Our final wine also comes from the anniversary series. It is the 2011 vintage port. Now, if you look back at old Wine Society lists dating back to our founding in 1874, port played a massive part in our early lists. It took up a fairly significant chunk of the sales, and so we'd be mad not to include a serious vintage port in the collection. This is produced exclusively for us by the Symington family, who are one of the most important wine families, not just in Portugal, but also the whole world. And it is, as I mentioned, from the 2011 vintage, which is really one of the top vintages of the last 50 years. It was kind of decided pretty early, or everyone believed anyway, that it would be a declared vintage pretty much from the start. The conditions of the year were pretty perfect for producing a really high quality vintage port. And this is predominantly Touriga Nacional. It's a blend from two regions, the Quima Corgo and also the Douro Superior. So balancing that lovely, fresh, bright intensity from the Quima Corgo with also those warmer, richer, dried fruit characters from the Douro Superior. And now it's really ready to drink, I think. If we have a taste, we can see what we think. That is really good. What do you think?
It's so tasty. It's got real lushness to it without being cloying. That freshness really comes through, helps you want to go for another taste because it's not overly sweet, overly sumptuous, while still having that really lovely ripe fruit. It's it's a really nice vintage port. I really like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's one of those vintage ports that it is youthful still. There's still plenty of tannins and plenty of richness, but it's so well integrated that I do think this is very much approachable now. I'm sure it will age for another 20, 30 years perhaps, but there's so much, as you say, kind of plushness to it that it makes it really inviting at the moment. And really the mark of a top quality port, especially vintage port, is that integration of the spirit. And it's just got wonderful freshness. It's totally integrated. It's lovely and balanced. And you are starting to get those more savoury, dried berry, woody, cigar-y notes that aged vintage port really benefit from. And in terms of how you'd serve it, what do you think?
Oh, I mean, personally, I would just like it by the glass because it's such a nice drink. It's the complexity that you're getting from the spice and the start of those tertiary flavours is really complex. And I can see this working really well with a good hard cheese, maybe something like a Gouda that's got some of that nuttiness and that kind of caramelised note to it as well, to balance nicely with the sweetness of this. Because we should say as well, being a sweet style of wine, you don't always want the sweetness to go with something sweet, so actually having it against something savoury would be a real nice pair. Or you could look to something like a really bitter chocolate mousse if you did want to have it with a real sort of sweet pairing.
Oof, that sounds pretty good. I would definitely recommend decanting. Being a vintage port, it will be unfined and unfiltered, so it probably will throw a deposit. And I'd have it in the decanter for an hour or so before drinking it. That being said, we've opened this straight away and just poured it in straight into our glass, and it's already so opulent. But I think it'll develop over time in the decanter. So yeah, I think it's a real triumph, and I hope you enjoy it.
And of opulence, we should just mention as well the label for the anniversary series wines. You'll see it is different labelling to the generation wines that we've just shown. All the anniversary wines have this label, and it is taken from one of our previous lists. And it's a really nice sort of carry through of our history again in the range.
Absolutely, I think it looks the part, it tastes the part, and yeah, we're absolutely delighted. So cheers.
We hope you've enjoyed sampling our generation and anniversary wines to celebrate our 150th year.
To see the full range of wines, please head to our website.